afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring the meeting to order. Could I have any apologies in order of business, John?
Apologies from Councillors Young, DeVink and Montgomery, Chair. The order of business is as published.
Any declarations of interest? Okay. Move on to item 4, 4A, commercial operations. Ricky, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I'll go through the report highlighting some of the kind of most salient things over the last year, and then happy to take questions from members thereafter. In terms of waste, I think it's worth pointing out, as I have done in the very first sentence, that unlike a number of other authorities, for example, Scottish Borders Council, who recently experienced great difficulties and had to actually cancel their proposed contract to deliver waste treatment facilities, this authority have actually made significant progress in the last year, not least of which is that we now see the food waste plant ready for commissioning in the next month or two, but secondly, progression to a point where a planning application has been submitted for the residual plant, both of these obviously to be located down at Miller Hill. I suppose in terms of overall what that's going to allow us to do, as I suggested in the second paragraph, is that we will be recycling, I would expect, in excess of 60% of our material by 2020. The other thing that I think is worthy of note is that the street sweeping review that was done, which essentially was looking to make best use of the resources. There's two things that I would highlight in terms of why I think that's being particularly well received. One is the figures that we've got for the cleanliness index, which show that we are improving. But secondly, it's some of the responses that are coming in from members of the local communities. They're praising a lot of the work that the guys are doing. For example, last week I got a very nice email about the guy that does the street sweeping in the Bonnyrigg area, and it was 2 or 3 of the communities round about that area, and they were all very positive comments. So passed that on to the guys, and to be honest, that has a significant effect in terms of the morale within waste services. Moving on to the road network, it's good to see that there is a very slight increase in terms of the overall road condition. Members will be aware in the past that what I've said is that with some additional funding, we should be able to maintain a steady state. In other words, the road network overall shouldn't deteriorate. We're actually showing a small increase. What I would say, though, is when you look at the performance indicators, it's clear that we didn't do as much of the footpath network as we had envisaged, and that's largely because we've spent additional money on deeper reconstruction in some of the areas that we've tackled on the road network. In terms of the street lighting, obviously we're making good progress to convert our lighting stock to LED lights, which, as members will be aware, has got lower emission levels and also a reduced maintenance need going forward. And indeed, we're now moving on to the next tranche, which is for 2015-16, where we've got in excess of £1 million of funding to continue that programme. The third paragraph, in terms of the 20 mile an hour programme, we obviously have the last wade trial in place just now, and we're monitoring that on an ongoing basis. At the moment, the traffic regulation orders, we're completing the orders for the Borders Rail infrastructure, and then we'll quickly move on to the traffic regulation orders for the nursery schools, with a view to having them in place by the time that the schools return after the summer break. Borders Rail, members will be well aware, looking down the line, that construction is substantially complete. Indeed, this weekend sees the official cessation of the majority of the construction works, and in the next week and a half, driver training will start. So within any constituencies that border the rail, then you'll see a large increase in the number of trains that are going up and down the track. Similarly, there's a number of works that we're doing currently to progress infrastructure adjacent to the rail line. Examples of that are the footpath that's going up to the Mining Museum that links to the station. That's being done by our own team. And similarly, one of our subcontractors is working on the traffic signal configuration at the Main Street A7 junction. Plans, as I suggest, there are well advanced for the opening events, both on the 4th and 5th of September. I'll give you a wee bit more background to that. In terms of the Friday, that's when we expect the Royal Guest. Still waiting, as of this morning, confirmation of who that Royal Guest is likely to be. But probably more of a focus is going to be the events on the Saturday, where we'll have 4 trains leaving from each of the stations in Midlothian. That will include all our golden ticket winners. The competitions have essentially closed. We'll be looking at the submissions tomorrow and we'll be starting to fine-tune that. There's then a series of letters that go out inviting people to confirm that they'll attend, and Stark Events, who are doing all the event organisation, will then be sending out their packs, etc. So there's actually quite a lot. There's 4 events that we're going to have. We're going to have one Shaw Fair. The potential, and it's still to be confirmed, is that we'll have a community event at Newton Village, which is the nearest area adjacent to the station to have an event. Gorebridge, potentially, it could be at Birkenside. Newton Grange, the Mining Museum themselves are putting on quite a substantial event in conjunction with ourselves, so that will be in and around the Mining Museum on the Saturday. And the last one is at S Bank, and we're working with Edinburgh College. We're trying to get a kind of slightly different theme. So, for example, the one at Edinburgh College might have a kind of science-type learning experience event. But we've also been encouraged by the number of people that have volunteered to be part of the events in terms of providing entertainment and stalls, crafts, etc. So hopefully we'll be able to bring a bit more detail of those events that members will be given an invite to as well in the very near future. In terms of land and countryside, obviously we've made some significant strides in terms of improving the infrastructure, as I've outlined there. In conjunction with that, we've done a number of environmental improvements and obviously provided skate facilities at both Newton Grange and Bonnyrigg, and these are well used. We've obviously made, again, significant improvements in terms of trying to involve the local community. In terms of some of the work within the parks, Alan Crumholtz, Joe Cook have managed to maintain and slightly increase our numbers that are involved in that. But also some of the work that we've been doing, and I mentioned there Riverside Park, which is the most recent project that's completed to encourage people to get out and about. Moving on to the travel and fleet services, one of the major successes there is about bringing some of the school travel contracts in-house. And as I've outlined there's a further one, saving a further £24,000 by bringing that in-house. And one of the things that perhaps hasn't progressed as quick as I would have liked is the pilot with the NHS. But we've now got, we're almost down to the point where we'll deliver that. It's going to be something that we need to nurture to show real gains going forward. But we know what we're going to do in conjunction with the NHS. It's just a question of ticking that one off and getting it started. I'll probably pause at that point, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ricky. Russell.
Thanks very much for that report. Three questions that I do have is one on the road network. I mean, well, I accept it. There may have been, in your eyes, significant improvement. I don't think necessarily constituents see fantastic improvement. In fact, there's a lot of areas, I'm sure, that councils could come forward with and just say, you know, how and why there is a need for some of those roads to be improved. Now, I thought, and this is the question, that was the comment, now the question, I thought that we had a matrix where we actually didn't have elected members banging on the door to say, I want this done, I want that done, but it was actually had been identified by officers who had gone out there into the communities, seen the state of the road network, and then put it on a matrix so that as money became available, it could be paid off. So I'd just like to know what the status of that is. The other one, the second question is on the Borders Rail, and it's you made the comment, Ricky, there just now that, and we're doing certain infrastructure aligned to the Borders Rail. Now, it just seems to me in a project like that surely the infrastructure should have been paid for by the developer, in this case Network Rail. Normally in a planning condition we put down a section 75 that certain things have got to be delivered. And I'm just a little bit surprised. For example, like a path stroke cycleway to Newton Grange Station, we're having to do that ourselves. We're putting in money from the council along with Sustran to actually make that happen. Now, it just seems to me that that should be an integral part of rail travel. So the question is, how did that come about, and what are the lessons perhaps to be learned? I was going to say for the future, but well, you never know. We might get this rail line to Pennycook, who knows? Not in my time, but anyway. And the third question is really on the electric vehicles. I mean, I know we trialled them and we've got a number of vehicles coming our way. Is there any intention of looking at the fleet transport, perhaps on the smaller vehicles, to actually change them out? And in actual fact, maybe go a little bit further in saying that those people, that staff members throughout different departments within the council that need to use a vehicle, that we could have a pool-type vehicle system where they're using the council vehicle, i.e. electric vehicles, because a lot of their journeys are quite short. It's not as if they're having to travel 20, 30 miles, return journey, etc., and we're right on the margins of whether the thing will last that distance. But a lot of the journeys are short. If we get the charging points in, it just seems to me that there's a logical move forward to look at our fleet. I know there's vans, we've got vans already in the fleet. I'm just wondering, is there a process or a timetable to move that one forward? Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks. In terms of the road network, you're absolutely right. We have a road asset management plan for a road network, and decisions that are looking at significant investment, we do use that to determine where we spend the money. There is, as a result of that, there's a plan that gets generated, and it's quite simple. It's colour-coded green, amber, red. You see at a glance where we need to tackle, and that's exactly what we do. In terms of the Borders Rail, sorry, perhaps I wasn't clear. What Network Rail have done is said that that's the sum of money for a path, for example, at Newton Grange Station up to the Mining Museum. We've looked at that. We believe that we can do the work for the money they're bringing and actually show a return to our own account. And similarly with the traffic signals, as part of the planning conditions, there was a pedestrian crossing at Newton Grange. What we've done is work with our partners to actually bring much better infrastructure there. So that's kind of where we've done. It's not a question of us subsidising anything as a part of the rail. And then the third thing, in terms of electric vehicles, members will be aware that in very short time the Dundas buildings will be closing, and the electric vehicles that are currently based there will be coming down to Midlothian House. So there will in effect be a pool of vehicles, but we do have recently word that we're likely to get more money for electric vehicles, so we're going to increase the fleet as a result of that.
Margot.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really obviously very pleased regarding the Borders Railway and all the stations, etc. that's going to be there. But if you recall, obviously all the previous lines for the trains was all walkways, and we've always had a good ageing well community out there that used the walkways. Has there any plans been made to find alternative routes to put walkways in? Because obviously we want to ensure that our people have the opportunities to enjoy the countryside.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave Kenny, the cycling officer, and Lindsay Haddo, who looks after road safety, part and parcel of the Borders Rail project, was looking at alternatives. Clearly, we had the ideal scenario previously where we had an old railway line totally segregated Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that in terms of suitable replacements. Where we have. What we've done in quite a lot of instances is we've widened paths to accommodate both walking and cycling, and that's nearing completion. For example, one of the last stages was beside S Valley College. If you drove or went past that route, you would have been hampered by traffic signals for quite some time, and that's because we were widening the footway, which is compensating for that section between Dalkeith and Tesco, for example. So there has been quite a bit of work done in that.
Thanks, Ricky. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to once again congratulate you on the waste recycling service. I only had about 1 or 2 complaints about that, individuals who hadn't had the bins lifted for one reason or another. It's a service which is very high profile. So many things can go wrong, bad weather, all sorts of disruptions, and yet we seem to get very few complaints, and I think that it's something that should be noted, because in other councils there have been lots of problems in the transition, particularly switching from weekly grey bins, residual waste bins, etc. We seem to be running quite free of that. Just a quick question really on the LED lights, which again I'm glad to see being rolled out. Derek and I were at a meeting with some local residents, and some of them mentioned that new ones installed locally in Bonnyrigg had a sort of dark patch, I think it was, between
between the water
between the lights. There was a sort of dark patch, and we were not sure whether that could be that, you know, it's something which you can be tuned, as it were, or whether it's just a problem with the design.
That's actually one of the benefits of LED lights. They can be tuned, they can be altered. What happens is that a lighting engineer would go out, they've got a light meter, and there's got to be a certain level of light, so he would go and he would measure that. So if you give me the locations at any point, I'll get that checked out. And just going back to the waste, and thanks for the good kind of comments there. Just for members, just so that they're aware, there are plans afoot, or certainly discussions ongoing. One of the visions that are coming through from the improvement service is the potential to align all the collection services, all the waste services across Scotland, so that everybody, regardless of where you are, would know that today it's a grey bin, and that grey bin's picked up on either a 3 or a 4 weekly cycle. Similar with recycling, etc. So obviously what's happened over a number of years is that each local authority has kind of diverged into different ways, different collection regimes, etc. Now, the suggestion is that there'll be discussions coming forward as part of the kind of zero waste profile. But I just mentioned that's something that may come our way going forward.
Yeah, I welcome the report, and obviously there's been many discussions with the Borders Rail, but just to highlight the gains that we're actually getting, you know, from the Borders Rail and the Legacy Fund, and I don't know if you can explain more about how that can be used, you know, and the projects. But it's been raised before about the need for more cycle and footpaths with the Legacy Fund. And maybe even a cocktail funding kind of package to meet our other aspirations, our local plan, and safe routes to school, and linking the stations, and, you know, more cycling, and, you know, cycleways provisions, and etc. And I commented this morning about the successful breakfast business meeting we had at the Mining Museum, and I've also commented this morning about how the traffic light signals, when they were being proposed for Newton Grange Junction, the Main Street and A7, it met with Community Council approval straight away, because it was all included in the neighbourhood planning, and it ticked so many boxes of the neighbourhood plan, and it helped to legitimise it, the work to action on it quickly.
Maybe just kind of answer some of those issues in reverse order. You talk about Newton Grange Community Council, a meeting I was at probably about 12 months ago, and they were keen to see something happen at Newton Grange Junction. We've done a number of things as a result of the the joint work in there, one of which you touched on cycling. You'll notice now that the infrastructure is starting to take shape, there's actually crossing facilities for pedestrians and cyclists. There's a widened footpath that allows anybody from the Newton Grange area to come, use the junction and then use the shared cycleway into the station. And again, just for members that perhaps didn't manage the breakfast, one of the good things that was coming through from Abellio is their long-term commitment to cycling. One of the things that we are working on, we're successful in terms of bidding, was to have infrastructure within the station that highlights the available routes for people to actually use the cycle network. There is quite a significant network within Midlothian. What this will do for anybody coming off a train is allow them to see the different routes at a touch of a button and see where they can go, whether it be just a cycle for leisure or to actually go and visit some of the many attractions in Midlothian. One of the other things that perhaps members will be interested in is that there's the potential for a bike maintenance facility, and I understand that at least 2 of the stations are going to have that, so it can attract people both in terms of youngsters that might want to learn how to kind of fix bikes, but also give them the opportunity for getting bikes and, as I say, exploring the countryside. And we're not standing still. You talk about the local plan. Built within that are our aspirations as a service to widen the network. So this is only a point in time. We are certainly looking to expand that going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ricky? Ricky, I just have one. Russell talked about the road network, and you're quite right to point out that we're above average on it. I'm surprised to see the footpath network resurfacing way below targets at 0.02 when it should be at 0.05. Is there a reason for that? Because it seems to have stayed there. It was 1.2, I think, for 13-14, and it seems to have dropped right down to 0.2 this year. Is there an explanation at the back of that?
Yeah, it's essentially, it comes down to finance, and as I suggested earlier on, a number of the roads that we've resurfaced and indeed reconstructed, it was envisaged that we would, for example, require to do a wearing and a base course, about 4 inches in old money, but we've needed to go down much more. We've also done quite a bit more work up in the areas affected by some of the Borders rail works up in the Tynehead area, so we've directed some funding there. That's in the expectation that, and I had discussions this morning with Transport Scotland, that we'll get some of that money back. We can then redress that issue in 2015-16. For members again, they'll recall that there was a previous council meeting where there was a request to come forward with a paper that was outlining just what the scale of the backlog in terms of the older housing estates was. And I've drafted a paper for consideration to come forward to the next council meeting. So that does 2 things. It highlights what I would describe as the unadopted footpath network, i.e. that's within housing's domain, and also the adopted footpath network within these older estates that's road service responsibility. And it's really for members then to consider whether they would like to see some of that backlog tackled. But as I say, some of the work that we had envisaged in 14-15, we will catch up with that in 15-16 by kind of rebalancing how we allocate that money.
It leaves me a wee bit bemused because I think we've made quite clear in the chambers that the state of the pavements that we're in is starting to become an issue out there, and I just wonder why we've sort of diverted money up to an area that Network Rail, which seems to be in the wilderness, when our main pavements up and down our high streets seem to be starting to fall into disrepair. And it's not a slight reduction, it's less than 50% of what we had talked about spending on our footpaths. And it seems to me that we've taken the money for the footpaths to put into resolving problems that we have on the roads. The report that you're bringing forward is mainly on council housing estates, and that might help resolve the areas and help free up some other money to come into pavements. But there'd be virtually no point in doing that if we're quite simply saying every time there's a problem with the road network that we're going to divert the money away for that.
Again, if I go back to the explanation that I gave to Councillor Imrie in terms of the road asset management plan, if you follow the clear guidelines that are within an asset management plan, you look at those areas, for example, of greatest risk, and when, in some of the instances that we've encountered, you have potholes that are 8-9 inches deep, the relative risk to anybody using that road far outweighs the potential risk in some of the footpath areas. So it's for that reason and against those principles that we've necessarily put some of that money into repairing the road network.
But if that's the risk, should we not be coming back to council asking for more money for that, rather than just taking it for other areas that members have set as a reasonable concern to get upgraded?
Again, what I would say is that the money that council have allocated through the capital plan is a rolling contribution, if I can call it that. And as I said, what we will do is in 15-16 we'll rebalance the spend. So those areas that we would have done in 14-15 we'll be able to do in 15-16.
Okay. Any other members got any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the council actually agreed to allocate money from the housing account, housing capital account, into our pedestrian network. What we also agreed was that a report come back on that. Now, if that money then, and if council sign that off, say, if it's coming back in June, surely that's extra resource going in to our public footpaths. So I'm not quite getting how. What I'm frightened about is that you've had to divert money because of the depth of the repair. I understand that, but that should be the depth of the repair within the road part of the budget. On the other side of the budget was money allocated for the pedestrian side of that budget. And what it seems to do is you've taken a load of that money just now and you'll pay it back later on. The difficulty, I think, for all elected members is that the deterioration in our path network is such that it's reaching critical point. And it's just that we've lost, say, 6 months, 8 months, even 10 months worth of repairs that will have to be put back in. And I don't, unless all of a sudden we have people standing about waiting to do that work, I don't think we'll do a catch-up. I think that's what I'm sure the chairman's concerned about, as I'm sure a lot of members are as well.
What I can say is that any work that we do isn't wholly with our own workforce. We have, as members will be aware, we have a contract, and on that we have 3 subcontractors. So in terms of allocating the work and getting through the work, we will be able to do that in 15-16, so we will catch up.
Okay. Ricky, could you just give us an idea of what the funding that was diverted to Tynehead because of Network Rail? Go and give us the story here as to what's happened here and who's taking the decision for us to push money in here to repair it if we think Network Rail are to blame for the deterioration of these roads, because they are reasonably rural roads, I would assume. And I just find it strange that we've diverted money in there. If we genuinely think Network Rail are responsible, we should be pursuing them to repair it.
The first thing is probably worth clarifying is that I used the Network Rail situation as an example. Obviously we've done road repairs across Midlothian, so the type of repairs and the deeper repairs, etc., that I'm talking about are not wholly in the area of where Network Rail have worked. But focusing on that and trying to give you a bit more background, it was always our intention to do repairs in that area. We did work in 2013, 14, 15, before a lot of the works that Network Rail carried out. And it was essentially edge reconstruction. It's where you have heavy goods vehicles. And on the road that I'm talking about, some members may be aware of it, it's between the A7 and the A68. And essentially it acts as a diversion route whenever there is an issue on either of these two significant roads between Midlothian and the borders. So in terms of whether it's a rural road or not, it actually does get quite a substantial number of heavy goods vehicles. However, the damage that was evident before the Borders Rail work started was substantially exacerbated by the working that was going on in that area, the number of heavy goods vehicles travelling up and down that road, the number of times where these vehicles are passing each other on sections of road that quite simply weren't built and suitable for some of the traffic. And not only that, I mean, when these guys are driving, whether they're on bonus or whatever, they're not necessarily sticking to the road. They're running onto the verge, and whether it's a little bit of a time, there's been further deterioration. So it's agreed that there has been deterioration. In fact, there was a site meeting with John Blair and some local members, local community, and Keith Brown, the Minister, and we went round the road and he accepted that there was damage. So there was then discussions with officials, and it was agreed that we as a council would submit a claim, if you like, and that's kind of what the Road Scotland Act requires us to do, is to identify what the additional damage is. Now, for the whole length of the roads, we've not done all the repairs, but for the whole length of the road network, we've put a substantial six-figure sum to Network Rail to come back to ourselves, in other words, recompense this council for the work that A, it has done, and B, the work that still has to be done up in that area. And in that respect, we will be working into the latter part of 15-16 and some parts of 16-17 to complete some of these repairs. So at the moment, we are still waiting on a formal response from Network Rail in terms of what they believe this council will be awarded as a result of the claim that we've put into them.
Can you give me a wee bit more of the detail of this meeting that took place? Because I thought, as Russell says earlier, we had moved away from that. Elected members would come in and have meetings and argue and press to get road work done, to effectively accepting the professional view of what was the priority, because there seems to have been a meeting here and suddenly the priority has changed, and I'm becoming a wee bit concerned about that.
Sorry, no, this wasn't a meeting to agree or otherwise what needed to be done. That was a meeting, and bringing the Minister on board was to, I suppose, essentially have him use his powers of persuasion, if I can call it that, with Network Rail to respond to the claim that we were making. There was quite a vociferous outpouring from the local community, because they saw the work that was ongoing, they saw the damage that was being done to the road network by these vehicles on behalf of Network Rail. So that kind of meeting was a culmination of that, just to say to Network Rail, you need to meet your obligations here and address the claim that Midlothian Council have put into you for the finance to repair the road that came as a result of the damage that's been caused by vehicles used on your behalf.
Okay, sorry, I thought you had said that there was elected members at that meeting that were pushing for that as well. I must have picked that up wrong. Well,
you mentioned elected members in when you were giving the report just now, when you said the John Blair, and there was elected members there. Now, it might have not been elected members, it might have been a slip of the tongue, but you did say that.
okay, Is there any other questions on this issue? It's one of the issues that we'll look into, because I'm becoming to get concerned. I could get a group of folk, and so could every one of us, that would actually stand and say, we'll look at the state of the road here, and it's because of numerous things. And if we start going back down that road again, Ricky, we'll be at the extent where them that shout the loudest are the ones that get it, and I'm becoming concerned. That's why we've diverted money here. Any other questions on that issue? Okay, Ricky, thank you. Item 4A2, Finance and Integrated Services. Gary. Fairly.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly run over the report. The year in question, I suppose, was a period of significant change for the service. We started the year with a management review, so we saw a significant reduction in the number of managers within the service and the management posts. On the back of that, we've throughout the year, under the auspices of the ISS review, taken forward a review of the majority of the functional service areas within the service. That work is getting towards the end stage, and has really transformed the service from one that was spread across 3 directorates, and sometimes in a very piecemeal fashion, to a cohesive single service that's focused on delivering the priority functions and activities. Within the service, we focus on a number of key achievements, and these are listed in the report. Members will be well aware of the position with the budget and the position with the financial monitoring, and I think we can continue to maintain an effective level of financial stewardship and have a robust capital plan in place, supported by effective treasury management functions that support investment in the many infrastructure projects that Council has approved. We do have challenges in that area. I'll come back to the challenges later in the presentation. In terms of our other significant asset base, our employees, we now have through Council a new people strategy which we'll focus on, and that's about investing in our employees and making sure that we create the right environment for them to deliver the frontline services. As a service, members will be aware through the financial monitoring reports, amongst other things, the challenge of sickness absence in particular service areas, and we continue to work on that. At June Council, you'll see the latest position in terms of new buyers, and I'm pleased to say that we've seen that overspend reduce. As a service, we've worked across the Council, and we've achieved the Healthy Working Lives Gold Award for the first year, again reinforcing the importance of our employees. We've also saw, as a council, we spend a significant sum of money in the local economy and nationally in terms of our procurement. We've seen our procurement capability rise yet again. Members will recollect back in 2010 we were languishing at virtually the worst performing council in Scotland at 19%. In November 14 we got up to 65% into up amongst the sort of top quartile. We've still got a lot of work to do there. We'll be bringing a revised procurement strategy forward to Council at this next meeting, and that really focuses on securing the social aspects of procurement, the local jobs, the living wage, and apprenticeships, etc., along with getting best value from the various goods and services we procure. As a service, within the remit, we have transformation, and we continue to focus on supporting services as we transform to achieve better outcomes, focus on our priorities, and achieve financial sustainability. So it's a very quick run through of the achievements. In terms of the challenges, there's no real surprises in there. We have, as a council, had a challenging financial situation for as long as I can remember, and the consequences of the May election and the budget that we now expect early in July won't make that any easier. So we've got that to react to in terms of the short term and the longer term, and we're working on proposals for that, and again those will come forward to Council shortly. Excuse me. The other key areas, I suppose, some significant projects. We continue with the ISS review. As I said earlier, we've made some really good headway in terms of revising the staffing structures. That's only the starting point. We now need to get in about, for want of a better phrase, our business processes and our systems, and really make sure we're running effective and efficient systems, processes, that we don't have waste, that we don't have that they're customer focused, and everything we do adds value. So that work's ongoing. We then have a number of key projects, and Council approved in, I've forgotten when it was, I think it was February, we had a report in terms of the review of local government terms and conditions. That work's ongoing. We committed to update Council in June, and we'll do that. We are, as I touched on, looking ahead in terms of financial sustainability. As a leadership forum, we had our auditors, Grant Thornton, visit us last Thursday, and just given some of the experience in England, and I suppose just, they presented the sort of future scenarios for local government in terms of where you could be. Councils could be in a position at the worst where they're effectively giving up and handing back the keys to Whitehall in terms of English local authorities, and I'm sure that's not where members or officers want us to be. Or alternatively, we can adapt and be innovative and really address the challenge head on. So we're working through a programme that we can look at how we deliver our services, how we fund our services, what the challenges are, really to deliver excellence in our services despite the funding constraints that we see coming. Not an easy task, but it's a challenge that I think as an officer corps we want to address. We've also got a number of issues in terms of service. The financial close for New Battle High School remains an issue for all of us. I'm sure Gary will feel like is an issue for him as well as me from the financial side. Maintaining financial discipline and just keeping a lid on expenditure. We've got a number of strategies that we want to update. Next Council will see the procurement strategies I've touched on, and we also need to look at our digital strategy and our asset investment. We've made some really good investment in our school estate, whether it's tablet technology or PC replacement, but we need to look at the longer term sustainability of that investment. And just as members were talking about earlier in terms of the road network, just how we sustain investment in our existing asset base, whether pavements, roads, schools, etc. So those are the successes for the year. The service that ends the year in a much better position, in a much completely different position than it started the year, but a service that then still has its own challenges and at the heart of delivering the challenges that the Council face. So happy to pause there and take any questions, Chair.
Questions? Comments? None? Gary? Jim?
You mentioned that Gary might be able to help in terms of the financial close for New Battle. From your perspective, can you report where we are in terms of are we getting any closer to financial close? What efforts have been made to try and get that over the piece?
We received information at 13:48 today, virtually as before coming up the stairs. That I think it was that, or 12:48, but there is some information that's coming from SFT. I don't know if Gary's had a chance or has had a prior sight of that and can say a bit more.
Yeah, it was 12:45.
12:45, right.
Yes, we've received a letter from the Deputy Chair of SFT this afternoon. That information, while we've still got to digest the detail on it, does suggest that the ISA 10 issue is coming to a conclusion. Within the correspondence, it suggests that whilst the detail will be issued to us, and obviously we will have to analyse that and confirm whether or not it's acceptable, and that doesn't just apply to this council, but all the participatory councils as well, it will take a further 6 to 8 weeks before implementation of that. So good that we've got to the stage that we are at now, but it will take a bit of time. Now, there is a voting process to go through, and as I sit on the board of Hubco, I know that they have to go back out to all the participants and get confirmation that the changes are acceptable and the constitution would change in the shareholding agreement as a result of that. But we've been, crikey, 3-4 months just to get to this stage, if not longer, since the initial proposals were put from SFT to the Office of National Statistics down in Westminster. So significant progress, but still a wee bit of time to go before we can get started.
Now, given the last time we spoke in the Chamber about this issue, we were talking about, you know, trying to get it concluded in sort of the March, April time, and there was concerns that if it went much beyond that, we couldn't guarantee that we could hold the prices and things like that had been agreed, or anything. You know, what kind of impact is this likely to have in that respect?
Since we talked last time, and I gave assurance to the Chamber that I would go back to SFT and challenge them on the indexation link, and we would try and get an inflationary adjustment to safeguard us against that position of contractors increasing the price. I've been successful in extending that through to June, and we have a figure on the table from the contractor which matches that. So we're both inflated in terms of our contribution from the government, and we've seen the adjustment that the contractors made, so we've got a position to the end of June. Beyond that, we will have to renegotiate that, but the underlying principles have been established, and it's expected that we would get the same courtesy if that extends beyond June to get this to a conclusion. Personally, I think if we went back to the contractor and asked them to extend that for a further 2-3 weeks, I don't think that would be a particular issue for them. But we still have to test that.
2 or 3 weeks, but we're talking about potentially 6 to 8 weeks.
Sorry, I'm taking it to the end of June and then adding a few weeks onto that.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Gary Fairley?
Ask another question. The one thing, no, of Gary, not this, not Gary this time. There's no any mention in any of the paperwork here about the switch programme. Where are we with that? How many people is it in there? I've missed it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think we've still got. I suppose I see it as an achievement, a successful transition, and I think within the body of the report we set out the statistics. Again, I think the programme early in the year we were looking at potentially significant cost overruns, but I think if my memory serves me right from the papers I was reading earlier today, as we approach the year end, and I think there's a net overspend, so that's unfunded costs of staff that have been switched for the whole year of around £50,000, which in the context of the alternative of compulsory redundancy payments and pension costs is although I haven't done the assessment on the in detail, it strikes me as being a reasonable cost in terms of the alternatives of compulsory redundancy. But I think, if my memory serves me right, and sorry I don't have the page number in front of me, the stats should be, yeah, FIS S52, yeah. So that's the position as at 14th of April.
Okay, any other questions? Gary, I have just one question. In your challenges and actions and the people strategy, action A, review of local government working terms and conditions and associated culture changes. What does that mean? What are you reviewing? Are you reviewing the full working terms and conditions? Because there's always been times where we've wanted to look at stuff and we've been told, no, it's in the red book, it's a condition and each individual council can look at them on a unilateral debate, because it was suggested some time ago, for example, to cut sickness absence, you would just quite simply make the first 2 days you didn't get sickness pay. And we're quite simply told, well, that's there. Can you maybe give some? Again, I don't have it in front of me. We brought the report back to our report to council that set out the sort of scope of that review. So it focuses on pay and grading at the lower end of the local government pay scales, not the whole pay scales. To do something across all 14 grades would be extremely challenging from a financial perspective. In terms of the terms and conditions, we are very much committed to maintaining those conditions which are set nationally, so we're not going out to try and change anything that's within the national terms and conditions framework. There are some elements of the terms and conditions that we can set locally, and those will potentially form part of the review, but it's still work in progress. I wouldn't want to say much more at that stage. So we'll look at there are really 4 parts to the work we're doing. First of all, what are our pay scales at the lower end of the local government terms and salary scales, and how are they affected and impacted on by the adoption of the living wage and the escalation, the increase that we can expect to see in the living wage over the coming years, and how do we have a pay and grading structure there that's sustainable. Secondly, to look at for all staff whether there's more we can do on non-financial rewards. Council already has significant non-pay benefits for staff, where their pensions, physiotherapy services, a number of non-pay benefits. So we're looking at opportunities to change or enhance those. To look at our policy framework from our code of conduct down through our absence management and other policies, really to make sure that they're fit for purpose. And then finally to look at how we invest in lifelong learning, so that staff have increased opportunities to advance and increase their earnings through taking on promoted roles. Okay. Any other questions for Gary? Okay, I'll maybe get some more of the details of that off you, Gary, at a later stage, but thank you for that. Item 4A3 is Property and Facilities Management. Gary Sherritt.
Thanks, Chair. Similarly, I'll go through the summary report and pause for questions thereafter. Looking through the front sheet there, touching on each of the subjects, the Asset Management Rationalisation Programme, we are now moving into the second floor of Midlothian House. It says in May, we're actually starting that next week in terms of preparatory work there. Delay has been down to a staff member of the contractor being discharged, so we've had a change of personnel in there. We'll be back on track as of next week. Housing phase 2, we currently have the 3 Pennycook sites coming to conclusion and are on programme. The next release of sites at Edgefield Road, Poulton Street and Green Hall are going through the consent process at present. There's a detailed report put to May Cabinet outlining the progress on the second phase of housing. Sport and leisure, the strategic plan for sports development and physical activity is ongoing. That's something that started and it continues to be chaired by Sport Scotland, and it's a cross-directorate initiative. We're looking at making sure that we are delivering the needs and requirements of the clients from the sports development perspective. The next meeting of that is actually this Friday. The successes through the year, we've now managed to get our housing stock 100% compliant with the Scottish Housing Quality Standards. There are 1 or 2 exemptions from that, and that's where we've not managed to gain access to properties to upgrade kitchens and the like, but it's a very small percentage of the stock. Looking down slightly there, the amount of money we've been securing for energy efficiency projects and insulation projects is nearing up towards £7 million, and that money's been spent hopefully in the right places and making a difference for the tenants and residents within Midlothian. The recovery of Scottish Water contributions, this goes back 5 years on previous housing projects and other projects that we've created infrastructure, and we now are at the stage of recovering that money from Scottish Water where they are due to us. Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre, you'll possibly be aware that it's now in the process of being demolished, and we've agreed that the incumbent tenant for that is satisfied with the new design, and we will be able to deliver that service from there. The Borders Railway, it sounds small beer in terms of £5,000, but it's actually enhanced the development of a lot of young players in and throughout Midlothian, with new coaching initiatives and training equipment, and trying to get more people involved with sport. So it has had a significant impact. It doesn't sound a lot of money, but it's been spread around well, and hopefully we see the results coming through in clubs membership there as well. Tone Zone within Sport and Leisure is at its highest rate of membership of over 5,000 members, and the retention rate of those 5,000 is now 58%, which is quite a bit up from last year. Over the page, a couple of highlights in there. Within the Facility Services team, they've now recorded the best performer in building cleaning for APSI Awards for the third time in 4 years, which I think says its own tale there. The introduction of primary 1 to 3 free school meals, that was a challenge throughout the year. We certainly, well, from January onwards, but the planning went before that. We were previously sitting as the highest mainland uptake of primary school meals, and obviously the challenge was to make sure that we were still achieving that and hopefully bettering it. As you see there, we're now sitting at 89% uptake compared to around the 75% mark that we're seeing nationally. So when the census is taken, we would hope that we're still retaining our status at that level, number one. The service charges within the property assets team as they stand now, formerly estates, saw a 10-year backlog of those service charges is getting sorted out. We had an issue with how that was being budgeted and indeed charged back through to the tenants, or indeed put into the right pots for maintenance regimes and improvements. So we've now got ourselves back on a level playing field, and hopefully with a programme going forward which will meet the aspirations of our tenants. Conclusion of Shawfair from the assets team, that was the disposal and the conclusion of the missives and the sale of the site there, and entering into Section 75 agreements. We've successfully tendered, and we are about to accept the Gorebridge North and Bilston's primary schools, which is the start of quite a significant school building programme, which includes Newbattle, as previously mentioned. In terms of the challenges, I've tried to keep these high level and look at the three main ones. The management restructure still continues. I mean, obviously we've had the top-down approach, and we're now going through the staff and trade union consultations into the implementation stages of those. So whilst it's not disruptive, it's a new bedding in process, and it will continue to be a challenge to make sure that we don't have disruptive frontline services. Newbattle High School, just touched on previous to this presentation, and then New Buyers. The idea was to bring back a report to Council in June to look at where the liability for the design failure on that particular project lay, and indeed how we would be going about recovering from insurance. That is sitting with lawyers. It's been through the engineers, and the engineering report has been passed to the lawyers, and until we've got that back from the lawyers, it's premature to release that. I have been assured by the lawyers that will be available for the August Council. I'll pause at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Questions, comments? Brian?
Yeah, well, thanks for the update information on new buyers, because this is something I think we've been all waiting keenly for. you know, and the timelines is now, you know, coming to fruition, you know, and if it's fair to say that we'll have more information on that, maybe at I'm anticipating at our August council meeting, you know, that we could actually have a closer look at that and the cost implications or the possibility of cost implications within the new buyers situation. In the new Battle High School, again, we're very concerned with the cost implications. The end date, you know, is still on target for that summer recess in 2017. If we get to these timelines that's been spoken about earlier, and say the end of July, you know, for ESA 10 confirmation, it's the other bureaucracy that follows at the back of that, and how long would that take, you know, before we could actually get, you know, on digging in the earth as such. And finally, Chair, if we could ask for something that's known in the report here, but it's maybe an emerging challenge or an issue, is the fire at Hopefield. I'm just interested in do you have any indications of the likely cost implications to the council on this? And was there unique records kept up there that have not been in other areas, or valuable equipment, you know, that was maybe stored there that we didn't have, you know, for other sites? And so just the pending damage, you know, that reported arson has actually done for us in the council.
Sorry, Brian, I don't if it's arson yet, and I don't think anybody does. There's a police investigation ongoing. This is a public record.
I'll subtract that. The fire damage is done for us.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the new buyers report, as I've just stated, is now intended to come to August Council, and that will give clarity on the situation there. New Battle, the end date, we've set a programme with the contractor of 2 years, and if we start in July this year, then we'll hit the target that we want, which is the summer holidays of 2017, and that allows the transition for the schools and indeed a slow entry, as we found in last week, to be successful. So we have the community buildings opening ahead of the school and making sure people are familiar with the workings of the school. To get to financial close, we have concluded the Stage 2 report, and we've got the draft contract arrangements in place pending the outcome of this ESA 10. We didn't know how that was going to influence those documents. So my intention would be to use the 6 to 8 weeks that's been noted in today's correspondence to make sure that we hit that and don't delay beyond any timeline that's out with our control there. Hopefield Fire, yes, it's very unfortunate in a lot of respects. We have had records stored there for some period of time. My understanding is it's something in the order of 24,000 documents. So there's a considerable amount of paperwork that's been lost. To give reassurance to the Chamber, the Information Commissioner was involved in how the remnants of the fire were disposed of. So we have been totally upfront and transparent as to how we've done that. We've done that under certification with the demolition contractor and disposal teams. Equipment within the building was limited to furniture and some boiler parts and some kitchen salvage parts that we had retained from other projects that closed down and then put aside. So whilst it's disappointing, it's not too financially to our disadvantage. The fire itself is now subject to an insurance claim. We've met with the brokers, indeed we met with them within a few days. A team came up from England to discuss that with us, and there's two scenarios. One is that we take the cash, which would be probably detrimental if we decided to replace a like-for-like building. If we replace like-for-like building, then obviously we get hopefully like-for-like costs along with that. If we take the cash settlement, it'll be discounted. That's the way it's been explained to me at this point in time, and we obviously await final clarity on that. But needless to say, it is a valid claim, and it's a claim that's progressing with the brokers at this point in time.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment. I mean, in terms of records, our primary record stores at Bonnyrigg Garage and our most important and sensitive records are kept there. So this was very much a secondary store in that regard. So that's not to dismiss the loss of these documents, but they weren't amongst our most sensitive and most critical documents because they're at the archive at Bonnyrigg Garage.
Brian?
Yeah, okay, the records obviously have gone, but that's not the only record. Is there an IT record, these kind of archived documents as well? So it's still available to us if we need it for further scrutiny or audit committees or something like that. You know, just in case we needed to fall back on any of these documents, are they still available within the council structures? And the ballpark figure on the costs of the delay, you know, obviously Morrison were appointed quite a few months ago for the main contractor at Newbattle. So are they giving you any indication of how to delay their start date of their any further sort of cost implications? And the insurance part, Hopefield, I mean, there's no figures and it's subject to a claim, you know, but are we likely to see any net deficit, you know, in our budgets, shall we say, you know, for even if we went with the replacing Hopefield like for like?
If I could take Newbattle first on that, the cost implications from the contractor were in the order of £400,000, and the contribution from the Scottish Government was in excess of that. So the net effect is it's actually slightly positive. Not much, but slightly positive. On the insurance, on the records, unfortunately the head of services that's just left has got that under his remit. I'm not so sure about digital backup. I couldn't answer on that one. On the insurance position, if we took the cash and we had to then replace the building like for like, there would be certainly a net deficit.
Gary, can I just mind you this is recorded and is open to the public to listen to the recording, so anything you do say shouldn't jeopardise any claims or any actions that you might take or the council might take at another time.
Thanks for that reminder, Chair. On that basis then, I don't think we should comment further on the net position.
Thanks, Derek. Gary, I raised it this morning with Ian about chauffeur, but a different issue altogether, because you've got in here that it's now, the development site has now started. I'm well aware of that. It was starting this week. McTaggart and Nichols contractors are in. But so get the long-term picture for chauffeur is 2 new primary schools and a high school. And if Colcott's go ahead, they're also talking a primary school down there. But in the short term, Gary, for the building, there was to be an extension improvements to Danderhall Primary School. Could you maybe just give us a wee update on that now that chauffeur, after 18 years, has started?
Yes, I mean, chauffeur in its entirety is a colossal project, 20-year project, and needless to say, there are various strands that have to be secured and battened down. The primary schools, the high school solutions. In conjunction with our education colleagues, we are looking at Danderhall and the solution that will be applied to that. And at this point in time, that really needs to come from our education colleagues as to what that would look like. But there is Section 75 monies within the mechanism which will be drawn down for Danderhall.
Jim?
Gary, you mentioned there that the council have now 100% its housing stock meeting the Scottish Housing Quality Standards. I recall that, you know, we spent a significant amount of money and managed to draw down a significant amount of money from the Scottish Government to fund mains gas going into Pathhead on the basis of meeting the Scottish Housing Quality Standards for our housing stock, considerable housing stock in Pathhead. And I know that it left some other communities, places like Middleton, Carrington and that still have council houses in there. We are having then to try and achieve that there. Have we achieved that there? And if so, how did we do it without access to mains gas for heating purposes?
They haven't obviously been upgraded without the gas system going into it, but they fall into the exemption category. So whilst we've got 100%, there are small exemptions within that we're permitted. They don't
meet the housing quality standard.
In every other sense they do, but not particularly on that gas supplied fuel heating.
Any other questions, comments? Brian?
Sorry for maybe my ignorance on this point, but the term contracts that you're working with, when do we get notified, that if we're changing somebody on the term contracts, or do we not get notified? Is it just keep coming off, is basically officer led on this? And is a term contract issued for a number of years? And could you tell me how many years it is for?
The term contracts are notified. They go through the members' bulletin, so they are circulated. Usually, a term contract is for 3 years with a potential extension up to 5. So it's a 3 years plus 2 is a normal practice.
Yeah, I'm not sure what a member's bulletin is, though.
Certainly, since I've been here, they've been coming through from the construction department and issued from there.
Well, I'm glad the members' bulletins are going to the officers because they're not coming to the members.
I'll look that back.
Okay. Any other questions for Gary on these items? Okay, Gary, I have a couple of questions. You talk, or Ricky mentioned Dundas buildings were moving down. With recent events in Bonarg, obviously there will be speculation about the attraction of the empty buildings and stuff like that, and no matter what the outcome of the investigation is, there is speculation there. What are we going to do? What's that building going to be used for when you vacate it, or is it just going to be lying there? And if it is, what are we going to do to lessen the speculation within the public in Bonarg as to the dangers of leaving a building lying empty for long periods of time?
Again, I'll have to bear in mind that this is a recorded session. The intention is to, well, we are bringing forward a council paper which will deal with community asset transfers, and within that there is an element of it which protects the council from outside purchases of those buildings from community groups if the building is earmarked and the proceeds from that are earmarked for other use within the council's plans. The intention for Dundas has always been to be a disposal for sale, and then ultimately the receipts for that go back into the UN programme towards the depot. With the site being adjacent to St Mary's School and the catchment review that's ongoing, the addition of St Mary's School to the Dundas Buildings site becomes a more attractive site for developers, and we're exploring that with our education colleagues to see if that is a possibility, so that we get an amalgamated site. Whilst the building will become vacant towards the end of August, like any other building, we would have to put some sort of security measure in place. We even at Hopefield we had visiting security. We had the place boarded up, we had alarms in place, intruder and fire alarms. In fact, the insurance company were quite clear that we had followed all necessary protocol. So we would put the same in place and try and mitigate against any further fires.
Okay. Would it be possible to circulate the local members just what exactly will be in place once you've decided what it will be?
I can do that, yes.
Okay. Sport and leisure, Gary, and catering services. One of the things that I'm interested in now is the level of reinvestment because it doesn't seem to be matching the amount of money that we're now charging for groups. And I could give you several examples, but one of maybe the more blatant ones is if you go into the cafe area at Lastmead High School, where you've got tables lying there that are chipped now. This is a cafe that's taking 300% more than what it was earmarked to do. If you go to the all-weather pitches at Poulton Hall, the top end of them, where the top end of the full-size pitch is near enough getting to the stage unplayable, yet we're charging boys clubs £16,000 a year to use these facilities, and you're now at the extent of people not wanting to use the top end of the pitch because it's so badly rutted. Because of the cost, it's broken into 3 bits, it's rather as one full pitch. And this is just about not so much just these 2 areas, but it is the level of reinvestment that we put into them. You see in Lastmead High School, when it first opened, or the centre at Lastmead Centre, where we clawed back about, I think it was £300,000, the additional income that we got. How much additional money was put in for maintenance? Because obviously if you're taking £300,000 more, it's a sight busier than what you thought it would be. And therefore there's a sight more use, so a sight more maintenance. And again, a lot of folk will think, oh, you don't need that when you've got 1,500 kids running about a building, and a site that's used as extensively as it is. It almost needs weekly swept through just to see what's damaged, what's been repaired. And I mean, I've raised several different issues with you on that, and it's more about pride of ownership. But this is more about how do we work out the reinvestment. When I spoke to Justin Venton about the all-weather pitch, and just said, I'm going to have to put a report forward to try and get money to replace that section of the pitch. And I'm like, well, when we're charging that kind of money, surely there's so much it gets put aside in our accountancy programmes to actually look and say, well, we need to replace these things every 15 years or every 10 years. Surely there's something set aside within the budgets of the divisions to say, well, we know in 10 years or 15 years we're going to have to replace this. How do we work that?
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is a cross between the life cycle costing as was set out in the budget right at the start, and then obviously the accelerated need because of the overuse. Planned preventative maintenance schedules, as we call them, are set in place for Lastmead High School. But if there's acceleration to that because of deterioration through use, we'd have to revise that. Those figures have been put to our finance colleagues, and they're put into the budgets as they are just now. But specifically on the likes of tables and the likes, I think that rightly so we come back to the service and we'd have to look at putting that money aside to replace that. I'll certainly look into that particular element. The Poulton Hall artificial surface up there is something we are currently looking at as well in terms of the replacement, but not just a replacement but also an upgrade to try and make sure that we give the best available pitches to the variety of sports that are requesting the use of those pitches.
Okay, I'd be handy to see that because I'm obviously aware of the massive usage of these pitches and the massive money they're bringing in, and it's just blind business case if you simply think, well, we can let them run right down, because what's happening is teams are saying to us now, we're not playing on that, we can only get the top end of the pitch and look at the state of it, but it's just, it's like throwing money away because they're not using it because it's not being maintained. So I think again it would be good that all members could get an idea, Gary, so if it's possible if we could maybe get an update for the members on how we decide that, because this sounds like again we wait until it's run down and then we then discuss how we put money in. I think money should be tapered off all the time, so is that there's no debate as whether you've got to get this. If you're putting a pitch in you know it's going to last for 10 years and it's going to need replaced after 10 years, then part of the charging should be to address that, so as the council's not faced at the end of the 10 years we're having to find £250,000. Jim?
I can understand the point you're making, Derek, and I think there is some justification for looking at reinvestment to reflect usage that isn't as expected, that's much more aggressive. But what I would also say is there are other communities, for example, that didn't even have a 3G surface, and them sizable communities. So there is a balance there, because it's about spreading things across the county. And there are other areas where probably the usage has gone in the opposite direction because of the poor quality of some of the equipment that's in it. So, it's not just, I understand what you're saying, and I accept that we should look at an element of cash being retained for that type of maintenance, but there are issues right across the board and not just there.
Yeah, I didn't doubt that, Jim, and I'll just go into the box if we want. It was paid for by community investment, no for the council. And what the council are doing is just dragging the cash out of the places, if we want to go down to the specifics, and no investing back in and realigning them. That was all developer contribution that paid that, not a penny for the taxpayer. And we see a massive use of it, which is simply going to go like that. And therefore, any money that's aimed at other places, and that's what I'm saying here, is you're now competing with that patch for the money that's in the pot, where you shouldn't be, because finance are dragging cash out of it that's taking it away from Gary. So Gary, instead of bidding for just a new pitch for Gore Bridge, he's actually bidding to fix the pitch in Bonnyrigg as well, and he's not got to win both bids. Any other questions for Gary at this stage? Okay, thanks, Gary. I'm sorry, I was about to say thank you. Midlothian Council, which is your end result. Kenneth?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I don't intend to go into the details of this, because we've actually had a lot of discussion and debate around all the service areas today. And of course, this is in large part a summation of that. But I'll perhaps make a few comments by way of introduction. The first thing I'd say is, I think looking across the reports you've had today, we are making positive progress in all areas. Now, there's some things which still not good enough. There's some things where we need to improve further. But both in terms of our internal review and also in terms of the external validation through inspection or other means, there is generally a positive story to be told in terms of service delivery. So that's okay, that's fine. I suppose the issue for me is that it's about the sustainability of that and how we keep that going in future years. And if you look at the various reports, I mean, the one that probably really stands out is Children's Services. Because in Children's Services, Mary didn't actually say this, but our total spend has reduced by 15% over the last 3 years, and yet we've got better outcomes. And for me as Chief Executive, the challenge, of course, I'm throwing back to other heads of service is, well, how do you do that? And that's not straightforward. I mean, every head of service has different challenges. They've come from different starting points. The cost pressures vary. And in a sense, what's happened in children's services is that some things which weren't being done particularly well in the past in terms of prevention and early intervention are now being done much better. But it is really important we learn the lessons of that. So in all areas, as I say, I think there's some very positive developments. And earlier on, Councillor Baxter asked about targets, and part of the target setting thing is identifying areas which aren't good enough and trying to drive that on. So, for example, this year I've said to Kevin Anderson, who's newly taken on revenues, that we sit in the bottom quartile for council tax collection, and that isn't good enough. And that is one thing that he has to. It's a new responsibility, but I want to see him drive that ahead, and he's made some progress in the first year. In terms of something like attainment, we spoke positively about attainment today, and we have made progress, and that is really important for our young people. But compared to other authorities, our attainment still is not good enough. We're making progress, but it's still not good enough, and that has to be a continued area of focus. I mean, almost incidentally, but two areas where, when you got the benchmarking report recently, we were in the top quartile or close to the top quartile. One was invoice payment and one was sickness. Corporately, we're just a bit off target on both of these this year. Now, in terms of invoice payment, we're actually improved in 6 out of 8 areas. But because we've had a blip in a couple of areas, it goes down. So there's a thing about just maintaining the focus and from my point of view, and I think from your point of view as members, been very demanding about what our expectations are. And all of this in the context of a great deal of change, the challenge of integration of health and social care. I mean, I think that is massive in scale. The challenges of welfare reform and the rollout of universal credit. And I think our response to welfare reform over the years, and members have played a very positive role in this, has been very good, but it does create ongoing pressures. I think that whilst the development agenda, both in terms of new housing, in terms of the waste facilities at Miller Hill, in terms of Borders Rail, in terms of the challenges we have in the school estate, it's good to be a growing council rather than a council like many in the West where the population is shrinking, because dealing with financial challenges is easier if you're a growing council, but it's still a significant challenge. And we also have new legislation, of course, in relation to the Education Bill, the Children's and Young People's Act, and these are challenging. And I think that the future of public service reform in Scotland, beyond integration as it now is a bit uncertain. What's going to come next? Because my own view would be that almost regardless of the political colour of the next Scottish Government, there will be further significant change. And part of the reason for that was alluded to by Gary, because the Chancellor's making an additional budget, or bringing in an additional budget on the 8th of July. It sounds to me like austerity accelerated, and there will clearly be implications through Barnett, etc., on what the Scottish position is, and I think we're all anticipating there will need to be some additional or a further Scottish budget statement probably in the autumn of this year. And when we last reported to you on the financial strategy, we were saying if we deliver all of our transformational savings, then we're left with, at the moment, about a £4 or £5 million budget gap for 17-18. That's before some of the additional pressures. It's before we come in with proposals on low pay, which I think is important. That may become more difficult after the budget. So I'm not trying to paint a gloomy picture. In terms of services and the quality of what we're doing across a lot of the service areas, we're ahead of the game and ahead of a lot of councils in Scotland. But the scale of the challenges ahead is going to be enormous. I think it's about to become more difficult. That will mean, very challenging decisions for the council over the next few years. And I think that in itself will influence thinking on the next stages of public sector reform, probably after the next Scottish election. So, without commenting on any of the details, that's just some of my thoughts about where we are as a council at the moment as you consider the end of 14-15 year report.
Questions? Comments? Okay, Kenneth, thank you, and thank you for your attendance.